we have everything in the membranes, like European Membrane Society itself, ICOM conferences, Euromembrane conferences, and even the journals like Journal of Membrane Science. But can we imagine that like 50, 60 years ago, so there was quite a new scientific fields of the membranes and membrane separation, and that's really a rare chance for the scientists to hear of many interesting things that was happened through that along a history of 50, 60 years of the membrane science from Professor Enrico Drioli, who was not only the scientist itself, but also the person and also visionary who is believing that merging of the different scientists and the areas which are far away from membranes give the benefit of the society today and tomorrow. And I was exciting to talk with you, Enrico, about the application of membranes for the space. I think that's probably next chapter after the water desalination and the application of membranes for the different industries. And let me introduce formally Enrico Drioli. Enrico Drioli is emeritus professor at the School of Engineering of the University of Calabria, founding director of the Institute of the Membrane Technology, CNR, Italy. Since 2018, a distinguished visiting professor at Nanjing Tech University College of Chemical Engineering, and since 2018, guest professor of School of Marine Science and Technology of Harbin Institute of Technology, Weihai, China. Since 2012, a distinguished adjunct professor, CDT, King Abdulaziz University, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And Enrico is honorary president of European Membrane Society, and it was awarded in 1999. And he is the author of more than thousands of scientific papers, 24 patents, and 32 books on membrane science and technology. And today there will be very special webinars. So there will be the topic about the European Membrane Society and as a success story. Professor Enrico Drioli, floor is yours, and we are looking forward for your speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexei. Pleasure for me to talk about the European Membrane Society, and the motivation is a real successful story. What all the history of the EMS, a successful story from the starting yesterday, but is still going. And I will try to show you that what also is going today and what will go tomorrow in the field of membrane science, membrane engineering, is very much still related to the initial ideas and motivation and pushing that the EMS has been able to produce in these around 40 years. When the story started at the beginning, there was not very much on membranes to be discussed. You know, the first meetings never organized related to membrane, to transport phenomena in membranes. There is no mention, no possibility to find in the literature, forget about internet, but in the real scientific literature, something on membranes, artificial membrane, before this meeting, 66. And this was not a real, was not a conference, was a NATO Advanced Study Institute promoted by Professor Harry Gregor from New York in the United States, and for Professor Liguori from Naples University. That's why, and I was just had in the 65, I was just a student in this under the supervision of Professor Drioli. But nothing before this. This meeting has been very interesting, and tradition it was organized in Ravello, in Villa Cimbrone. And that is the origin of the fact that later in the years, we have been trying to continue the tradition of the very first meeting on artificial membranes, never organized worldwide on this topic. Quite interesting, because in the less than about 40 years from that moment, a lot of progress have been obtained. And today, as you know, membrane technology is a dominant technology in different fields. We decided, following the first event in Ravello, to give a continuity to this kind of meetings. Ravello was really successful, and this is the first time that a significant number of the membrane researcher familiar to most of you trying to continue the NATO Advanced Study Institute with the first Advanced Membrane Science Technology Conference in the 77, and that was organized again in Ravello in the same location, Villa Cimbrone. And if you go through the face of the people present, you will find many people familiar to you, and if not familiar, the names will be familiar to you. Starting from Harry Lonsdale, and going to Alex Stern, and going to Heine Stratman, and going to some Italian people, Professor Wietz, etc., etc. All people that made some significant real contribution to membrane science. Professor Stannet, I see now his face here, Professor Pegoraro from Italy, that all Bill Icahn, the first president of a successful membrane company, Abcor, in a startup company, spin-off company from MIT, promoted by Alan Michaels, etc., etc. So that was just this, starting from this story, 66 first meeting, and basically nothing but already some people were realizing the importance of this field. And 77 was the second large significant conference in this area. In the same years, basically, as you know, in February, 26th of February 82, a group of 5 of us decided that it was time to try to organize a little bit more all the activities and the initiative related to membrane science. And so the decision to have a European Membrane Society was taken. And in the 26th of February in Toulouse, Pierre Aymar, from that moment, our permanent general secretary of our society, make the starting point of at the official under the official rules of the French law 901, that is very, very liberal, and we created this European Membrane Society. And that was a real, at that time, by the way, the name was different. It was not EMS, but it was ESMST. It was basically European Society of Membrane Science and Technology. And later on, we decided to make it a little bit easier. But initially, the idea was already there to combine science and also real application for the interest of all the areas where progress in this field were really creating benefits. And that was the situation when starting from 82, basically. So now we can start the story. Very few people were involved at that time. The promoter of this society were basically 5. You can see their name are listed here somewhere. And myself, no, Philippe Aptel from University Paul Sabatier in France, Heine Stratman from Tübingen, and Guntrager from Lund, and myself from Naples, Italy. I mentioned this name just to tell you that one of the characteristics of the European Membrane Society from the very early stage was a real international feeling. There was not a single country dominant at all. We always have been always integrating all the people active in the field in our system. And initially was just European, but as you will see, one of the characteristics still present today, we'll see the actual actions, was to try to promote this interest for membrane science worldwide. By the way, you will discover if you read the first bulletin of the European Membrane Society, what we call Membrane News, number 1. If you don't have, ask me, I will send you a copy. You will find that in this issue, one of the major real contribution in written that I wrote down in this Membrane News was coming already from China. China in 82 had some professor, there was no organization set up, but there were already professors who wrote clearly what was going to happen with membrane science, membrane technology. China. And you will see that today, after 45, 55 years, the prediction of the Chinese scientists has been had the real continuation in the years, and they are just is a country, China, realizing in the most large way a approach to the possibility to redesign our way of living, by the way, a lot of process based on membrane system. So that you can find in written in this Membrane News number 1, if you are interested. And I think you can read here. I like to mention that one of the first action of this European Membrane Society that was already clearly based on the idea to educate as much as possible young generation in this field, to learn the potentiality and to create interest and to promote new area of research, was to realize some action as the summer school. One of the first positive action, as you know, still present today, the activity of the European Membrane Society has been the first summer school in 84. The society started everything in 82, but in 84, we already created in France, in Cadarache, near the atomic, with the sponsorship of the Commission for the Atomic Energy of the French government, the summer school, and already quite successful. Professor Philippe Aptel, Professor Neil, and most of the young generation, a lot of the people present in summer school in Cadarache, again very successful, are today scientists still active in membrane science all around Europe. All European at that moment. I like to mention that this summer school is one of the most interesting activity promoted. In the years you can see here that we have been able to cover year by year, basically all Europe and more. There is not only, at one point we started to enlarge as much as possible our field of influence, but already from France to Italy, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Portugal, all the countries have been covered by the summer school, and another action to try to promote not only internationalization, not only the multinational project, but also to overcome the barriers, minimizing and making complicated to realize this final objective, was already one of the goals of the EMS. The EMS, after a few years, has been able to promote summer school in Poland, Wrocław, with Professor Winicki, and in countries in which at that time was not so easy to try to organize some conference, and for sure was difficult for the young generation from that country from the to move to on our side. So that was one of the strategy discussed in our board at that time and realized time by time. So we had the summer school in Czechoslovakia at the time, today the Czech Republic, but also in Poland and in Russia. So that was not, again, not easy, but the open mind of some of the scientists, Professor you have Alexei is part of the same organization, one of the largest research institute of the Russian Academy of Science, is the Institute on Petrochemical Synthesis, Top Chef Institute of Petrochemical Synthesis, has been the first organizer of a summer school in Russia. And that has been very successful. Another activity interesting that has been promoted already at that moment in the early years, and you can see in the 2000 already, but from the very early stage was not only talking about what is membrane science, but try to go in detail in some areas at that moment not very well, not familiar to many people. By myself, I had experience, and I was spending a lot of time in Brussels with the European Union, and I remember discussion with top officials of the European Union at that moment in the Division 12 that was taking care of science and research, mentioning that, for example, membrane reactors was not really of interest at European level. And was not easy to organize something sponsored by the European Union. So we tried to make a school specifically in this field. Catalytic membrane reactors was the topic of one of the summer school that we organized at ITM in Italy, in Cetraro, again, trying to open as much as possible, not only interaction with other countries, but also with new topics. And that was a very good idea, and there's been also some example in the years later. The other point was, I was mentioning before, try to not stay only in Europe, but to open our activities all around the world. You can see here one of the first summer school, sponsored in this case by the European Union, and had very strong support by the European Union. And if you are able to see in the middle, here is the professor, myself, and Professor Stratman, and Richard Baker, and Ruth Madsen, by the way, the first really engineer who realized a membrane plant in Denmark, and about 400 young Chinese researchers, all attracted and involved in membrane science and technology in a place very difficult to reach at that time in the 86. This was Lanshu in the Gansu province. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Gansu province, very up north, near the Gobi Desert. But at that moment, we were able to collect about 400 young students from all China under the umbrella of the European Membrane Society, learning about membrane science, membrane engineering. Very successful, and you will see the fallout at these kind of events in China are very present still today. And that is a typical good example. But the most interesting one that I like to mention already now, you see in 84, in the logic of trying to open as much as possible collaboration worldwide, we organized the first Europe-Japan Congress on membranes and membrane process. This has been a very, very important and significant event. At that time, in the early 80s, only two membrane societies were existing. Before the European Membrane Society was the Membrane Society of Japan. And that was created in the late in the 78, 79, something similar. So what I made at that moment, I remember I was the chairman of the European Membrane Society. What I made was to call the president of the Japanese Membrane Society and say, why don't we meet? And they were very, very open. They invited me to go to Tokyo, and we had was Professor Nakagaki and Professor Shoi Kimura. Shoi Kimura was the general secretary doing a lot of work, and Professor Nakagaki was the real president. By the way, if some of you will attend this the ICOM in July in Japan, you will hear something about Shoi Kimura. And because Shoi Kimura has been really for long, and he just passed away a few years ago, but has been really working for long and promoting and doing all the hard work to promote more and more this collaboration. But what is important for this meeting, that we had for the first time, two membrane society working together. And we were supposed to have an interesting meeting, but a meeting, not too important. We had about 500, 600 participants, very unexpected. And the story is telling you that Shoi Kimura and Professor Nakagaki have been able to have the largest delegation of Japanese scientists moving out from the country for going to altogether, a single event. That's what has been mentioned at that time. There were more than 60, 70 Japanese moving to Europe, to Stresa, just for these membrane processes. Keep in mind that very few people were really active in membrane research at that time. The situation is very different than the one we have today, where we have membranes all around at any level. So that was a very important event, and we will recall again because from this event has been also able to promote new action. And I will describe before this ICOM itself has been created at Stresa. Before going to this, let me mention that another action, I had to tell not very easy at that time, was to have another conference, the first conference, at my knowledge, in Soviet Union, still Soviet Union at that moment, 89, in Russia. Together with the Topchev Institute I was mentioned already before, we had in Suzdal the International Symposium on Membrane for Gas and Vapor Separation. Very interesting, and I was fighting a lot and organizing together with Professor Plate and Yuri Yampolsky this meeting, and the motivation was that I was a little bit severe, telling that we were going to organize a conference in English. And there was no way initially that the rules were Russian and English, with the translation from Russian to English, etc., etc. I say, look, that is a way to minimize the interest, the participation. So follow me. Let's try to have in English. And finally, everything was in English, no translation. Everything was just English. And the meeting, at my knowledge, has been, in my opinion, has been very, very successful. You can see here 89 Suzdal. By the way, Suzdal is a very beautiful city near Vladimir, in the Golden Ring around Moscow, and quite interesting place to visit. But for the first time, membrane for gas and vapor separation was very well discussed, internationally discussed in the Soviet Union at the moment, Russia today. And that was another event, not easy to organize, not easy to realize, not easy to understand all the impact that this kind of event had at that time and will have also in the following years. At that moment, as I showed you before, with the Chinese in Gansu province, the European Union started to promote significantly membrane science, membrane engineering. I was a part of one of the committee at that moment in Brussels, taking care of the international research project promoted by Division 12 of the European Union. And you can see that we have been able, not only for China, but in Brazil, in Malaysia, and in India, and etc., to have workshop between the European Membrane Society and the national organization of in Malaysia, or the national research organization with some interest or activity in membranes, India, Malaysia, China, everywhere. And I have to admit and to recognize that the European Union has been very positive during that period, about 5, 7, 10 years, in promoting and making easier for us to organize this kind of meeting. A little bit more complicated today than at that time. Some of you, maybe, or some of the people that you know, have been present and attending this kind of conference. Different action were also growing and has been important for the future, in my opinion, for the development of membrane science and membrane engineering worldwide. For example, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the fact that we, as the European Membrane Society, we have a strong agreement with the European Federation in Chemical Engineering. You know, in the years that we were promoting and creating the European Membrane Society, the professor, the director of at that time of the European Federation of Chemical Engineering and of DECEMA, Professor Dieter Behrens, was thinking to create a working party in the European Federation related to membranes. I had no idea about this, by the way, but he called me one day. He said, Drioli, I know what you're doing. I know about your membrane society. I think that we have to talk. So he invited me to go to Frankfurt. I went to DECEMA for the first time, and we had a discussion. And the end of the discussion was, why we have to do, no, we have the same ideas. We are both thinking that this is an area that can help and promote innovation, progress in science and engineering worldwide. Let's do something together. So at that time, we decided to create a working party, the only working party of the European Federation of Chemical Engineering, 50-50. No, there is each country can nominate one delegate in this working party, and each membrane society of the different country can nominate another delegate. So we have 2 delegates for each country, member of the federation, one coming from the membrane society and one coming from the chemical engineering federation. No, there are 20, 30 other section or working party of the European Federation. This is the only one with this kind of approach where chemical engineers and membrane people, eventually also chemical engineers, are working together with no fighting, not a single minute of a big discussion or bad competition has never been present between the European Federation and the European Membrane Society at that time. Today, we have to try to continue and to grow this kind of collaboration, and that's something that the younger colleagues have to take care a little bit more. But that's, again, another interesting action that was promoted. At that moment, it was eventually easier to be done than today. I was mentioning one of the interesting, crucial fallout of the Stresa conference with the Japanese colleague. You know, when we made this conference in Stresa, European Membrane Society and Japanese, there was no other membrane society worldwide. So it was just Europe, Japan. But we invited people from the United States, and they came. Not too many, but there were 20 or 15, 20 scientists active in the United States. And when they realized what was going on in Europe, and in Japan. They went back home in Washington and they say, look what is happening here. They had 400 or 500 people all coming from Japan, about 70 from Japan, and all the other one, all Europe, discussing, and we do nothing. So I was invited to Washington from the uh, National Research Organization of the American Chemical Society, also I think was present, promoting with DB and other well-known American colleagues for discussing the possibility how we created European Membrane Society basically. And in one day in Washington, the decision was taken to create the North American Membrane Society. At that moment, easily at that time, myself and Professor Nakagaki, who already decided in Stresa to have the new meeting in Tokyo, just in the couple of years later, in the 84, we had a call, I remember, very shortly and say, why not, instead of making Japan-Europe Congress on membrane and membrane processes, let's do something new. And so we said, have also the colleague from the United States present in this conference, and we promoted and called International Conference on Membrane Science, and became ICOM, International Conference on Membranes and Membrane Process. So that was the first ICOM in 86, if I remember correctly, that was organized in Tokyo. But the origin of this meeting, of this ICOM that now is going on all around the world, has been related to the Stresa conference. So we had in 87 was this. So again, chairman was Professor Nakagaki, the president of the Japanese Membrane Society, myself as president of the European Membrane Society, and we had about 700 participants, 400 papers, 28 countries were attending, and the strong support again of the European Union. You can see here this gentleman, he was one of the representatives, the ambassador of the EU in Japan, who attended our conference and gave a lot of help at this moment. I mentioned the story because today it's not clear. Many people don't understand that the European Union, made in some case, has been smart in promoting and helping and realizing a lot of interesting activity, as the one in membranes. Now you can go through if you're interested, and you can see that everything that started in Stresa, I have to say, started from the European Membrane Society and from the Membrane Society of Japan, but immediately was been growing and introducing also the North American Membrane Society that was created formally by invitation of the in Washington of myself as a representative of the EMS, and following still today we had this ICOM as the major conference in membrane field every 3-4 years going all around, and we will have again in Japan, in near Japan, in Makuhari, in Kiba. We will have again in July this year the new conference. But in the meantime, we had conference in China, we had conference in any part of in Korea and any part of the world, basically, and that's quite interesting to see how different is the situation compared to the starting of the Ravello conference in the 66 and 77.
Enrico, apologize. Your mic is muted, so we lost you when you start to talk about the presidents of the European Member Society. Can you unmute your microphone?
Now it's okay.
Now it's good. So can you go back to the list of the presidents of the EMS,
Yes,
because
yeah,
we
yeah,
lost
yeah,
you
yeah,
on that slide.
couple of
Thank you.
slides. This one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, just to tell that no, I've been president for long, too long eventually, and but starting from the 98, no, these new rules was moving. Every 2 years we were changing the president, and we had coming from UK, coming from Finland, from Germany, from Netherlands, from Italy again, Susanna from Germany, Belgium, Italy, and France, and again Italy with Helena at the moment. So there is a kind of different way of acting as in the rule, more democratic. I was a little bit a dictator, I have to say, but still the system is working very nicely in my opinion. And again, I was mentioning that we had the possibility to start to uh, make increasing the visibility of the activities of the society with the nomination of honorary members to the people who have been serving in science and in technology, these membrane science, membrane engineering. And you can see name from Orakedem from Israel, Tony Fame from Australia, and the European scientists, Heine Stratman, Gun Trager, and Narebska from Poland, Miriam Balaban from Italy, etc., etc. So there are many covering all the areas. Joao still quite active, and that's helping us in many different forms. I want to show that how significant has been also the action in terms of education, which is very necessary still today, by the way. And I'd like to mention one of the activities that has been growing under the umbrella on one side of the European Union, on the other side of the European Membrane Society, promoted by uh, a team of different universities all around Europe. And that was an European doctorate in membrane engineering. It was very difficult to promote a doctorate in membrane engineering, at least in Italy, at my time. And when I start to have problems in realizing the idea that was necessary to have a doctorate in this field, I decided to stop losing time discussing with colleagues, and I went to Brussels. I submitted my proposal, and with has been approved. So today, in the last 7, 8 years, we have been educating about 42 or 34, I don't remember, young membrane engineers with under this EUDIME doctorate that is part of the Erasmus activities, by the way, which has been quite successful. Quite successful for three things. I'm showing this because I should be very nice that the EMS will try to continue to promote activities of this kind. And together with international organizations, much more than European, but quite important, significant. If you see the situation, we had, that was a doctor in 5 years, and the participants were this University of Calabria, Montpellier, University Paul Sabatier in Toulouse, France, Twente University, Institute of Chemical Engineering in Prague, this Catholic University in Louvain, this Spain, the Universidad de Zaragoza, and the Nova Universidad de Lisboa. And also in the years we had one associate, I don't remember exactly which one, plus some associate partners, as you can see here, including European Membrane Society, the European Membrane House, Micropure, some Italian company, GVS, Alfa Laval, Veolia, Sapio, etc. Aachen University, by the way. Very interesting because this kind of activity have been able, we were receiving about 9, 10 or 8, 10, depending the years, grants from the European Union. everything was paid from the European Union, basically. And the fallout, the visibility, we had about the order, if you make a calculation here, in the different edition, first edition, second edition, third edition, 5 years, roughly about 100 application each year. So at the end of the story, we had about 500 application students from all around the world making application for this education in membrane science, just membrane science and membrane engineering. And you can have all the data if you are interested. You can see the spread, the distribution in the different country. Different country normally were between 20, 30 country and more. The overall distribution is here. You can see these nationalities, 35 nationality, 28, 23, 26 each time. And the fellowship 99975, no, in the last years was a little bit less than before.
Enrico, apologize for the interruption. Can you unmute your microphone? It's still we cannot hear you.
I don't know what happened. This computer, we have to change computer. That's still, I don't do anything. The computer do by itself. Anyway, don't worry. I mean, what I am telling is that these different, any edition, we had roughly 9 grants, 9 students totally covered by the European Union. And in total about the application with 500, the number of membrane engineer promoted has been of the order of 40. What is interesting, that's what I like to show, is the fact that the output, not in terms of if you go to the publication, the employment status, what they are doing today, you will see that that was one of the comments, positive, very positive comment made by the European Commission in Brussels, that all our membrane engineers promoted with the doctorate as a membrane engineers are now working at a very high level, most of them, large majority, in membrane engineering, membrane science. If you go in Nanjing Tech University in Nanjing, China, you will find Minzu working there. If you come to ITM, you will find 2 or 3 of them. If you go to Twente, you find 2. If you go to Nova University of Lisboa, you find 1, etc., etc. They are all very well spread and continuing what they learn already during doctorate. In many cases, is now part of what they are doing today, and with very positive recognition of their expertise and of the quality of the work they are doing. Okay, we had different kind of workshop and etc. Just to show you that there is a kind of family of this about 40 membrane engineers with the EUDIME mark, basically, and quite positive. In each country, in France, in Italy, this one in Italy, that was in our university, etc. This is in Lisboa, probably the last one. As you know, today we have one more organization that overcome where EMS is part and has been a strong promoter to the point that the first president of this World Association of Membrane Society has been Bart van der Bruggen, that everybody is familiar with, and he has been president and promoting the creation of this organization. This organization is a tentative to enlarge and to cover more and more worldwide the membrane activities and the visibility of membrane science, membrane engineering. At the moment, the founding members are North American Membrane Society, European Membrane Society, Asian Membrane Society, which means that the initial, what you can read in the statutes of the European Membrane Society in Toulouse in 1882 is exactly what you can read today in the World Association of Membrane Society. And the only difference is that we are not talking about Europe, but we are talking of the world. or any part of the world can be covered. Any organization. Today there is also the African Membrane Society, is for example part of this kind of the World Association of Membrane Society. I like to mention this to show the effect, positive effect, that the action of the EMS from the very early stage is still present today after 40 years. And if you just look what is going on here, you will see that the activities of this organization are following strictly the same strategy, the same motivation that characterizing the first steps of the European Membrane Society. Today we have Asian Membrane Society, European Membrane Society, North American Membrane Society, which represent in these all different other countries, including, for example, North America is Mexican, also there. The Asian Membrane Society means not just China, means Australia, Singapore, India, Malaysia, Korea, China, Taiwan, etc., etc. And you can see the different committee, and we have very wide spectrum of representative, including Alexei is a very active member of this organization. What I like to show, just to recall what I was mentioning, is that we created different working groups, but the most active at the moment is again, as the Europe. Remember, I was mentioned the European Membrane Society action number 1, summer school, education in the field. Look here, the first very active working group of the World Organization is again education working group. This we have just a lot of activity in progress, with including some education. What has to be done now is to have the education working group, in my personal opinion, try to promote at world level the kind of doctorate school that we promoted already and we closed already at European level. If that can be done, that could be very interesting, and the possibility to do it exists with this world organization, basically. Let me now show what is going on today. We started in 82. Everything started, remember, in 66. Not much was done before. No publication, no journal membrane science, no magazine. Today we have 30, 40 journals related to membrane science, etc. So you can expect that a lot of work has been done, which is true. A lot of work has been done, but we are still at the very beginning. Look here, if you look this data, try to have process articles in the last 30 years. You can see that if you go in the past century, there's been always a growth, but was basically linear until 2000. The real progress, the real boom is now. If you look what is happening from 2002 to 2022, we have before was basically linear. Now we have an exponential growth of the scientific contribution. And that's very, very important. This is only, in this case, only for some new activity, membrane distillation, membrane crystallizer. But membrane distillation is a typical example. The real impact in desalination, etc., people are looking to new opportunities, etc., and they look to membrane technology as one of the area of possible interest. There was nothing in the past century, except us, maybe 20 papers per year, 15, 30. Today we have 1,200. Last year in 22, today we will have 1,500 or 2,000. So everything is starting now in many activities, in many things. And that means some people already understood this. That is not only in desalination. If you look what is happening in desalination, you can see that again, also here the same story. Until 1995, 2000, basically there was a growth, but nothing significant. Everything happened in these last 10, 20, 25 years. Big growth, exponential growth in reverse osmosis, etc., when other activities are basically disappearing. Look, all the thermal systems are basically flat, or very, very small growth, maintenance of the old plant, the total is the reverse osmosis is today basically a dominant technology. This is, but if you do the same kind of analysis in other areas, the same story. And more than this is an interesting data. This is the distribution of energy by source predicted by big petrochemical company, basically. Now, if you look at their prediction, there is nothing more, no membranes involved. Everything was natural gas, nuclear, coal, hydro, etc., etc. We redesign a little bit this prediction, showing that there is something that has still to happen. In terms of research, a lot of progress has been done, but still we have to do much, much more. And you can have about 17%, if I remember, 17% coming of a form of energy not utilized today at all. That will be based on what we call salinity gradient, that's blue energy, not considered at all, totally ignored by the typical energy controller we have today, petrochemical company and similar. But in few years, in my personal opinion, the 17%, the blue one, will have some opportunity to become real. That means pressure retarded osmosis, reverse electrodialysis, etc., etc. If you go today in Saudi Arabia, where Alexei is sitting at the moment, I don't know if he knows that there is a plant under construction by a famous, well-known Japanese company, where they are producing a big plant, by the way, for producing fresh water. But the real final goal of this plant is not just fresh water. Fresh water make no profit. It's given for it's just fresh water. It's useful and necessary, but what is more important, this is a plant that is also producing electricity through PRO, pressure retarded osmosis. And the traditional people totally ignore this opportunity, but membrane engineers will be able in 1-2 decades to cover about 17% in principle of this new form of energy that will be very, very attractive in terms of no pollution and low cost, very well distributed. No one is controlling salinity gradient. Basically, everywhere there is a salty water and fresh water. And this is, Alexei was mentioning before, is one of the things that still has to be done. The other one is the space. No, we wrote recently a review on the membrane engineering in space engineering. Now, if you go through this report, you will see that our opinion is that a lot of activities, by the way, it's not our opinion, it's reality already in many cases. But the situation is that the membrane system can be very, very interesting for contributing to make space engineering growing in the appropriate way in the last few years, and in perspective, making living on the planets around us and making the traveling in space much more easy and convenient. One of the cases I like to mention, by the way, if you are lucky, and if you are not, ask me, I will send you some reference. NASA, European Space Agency, are already using membranes a lot, including mistakes. They made already some nanofiltration system that now they have to correct and to redesign because they were not working as expected, but they are already using in different situations in real life. But much more can be done. This is an interesting case. People, now we are going to Mars, as you know, in a few years, in 10, 15 years, the Russian, already people already sent from China, United States, are assuming that we will have 100,000 citizens of Chinese citizens or American citizens living on Mars in 1 or 2 decades, living there. Now, how is it possible? There's a lot of interesting things. Do you know the atmosphere of Mars, how it's formed? is basically CO2. Now, all the expertise that we have now on the capture of CO2 and transformation of CO2 can be transferred when we will be on Mars. And can be transferred. In Mars, there is no oil, no petrol, there's no methane. But if you go back in history and you go into Toulouse, where the European Membrane Society has been founded, you will find a university that is called Paul Sabatier University. Now, if you look what is Paul Sabatier and why there is a university on his name, he basically developed a system where CO2 and hydrogen reacting together for methane. Now, if you go in a country, in a place where the CO2 is 92-94% of the atmosphere, and you want to produce energy for methane, for example, that can be done. Can be done also because, as on the moon, by the way, but for sure now on Mars, we have water. This is the reaction that, Paul Sabatier, and where you can transform CO2 in methane with the Sabatier process done already 100 years ago. And that can be quite interesting, and the membrane reactors will be the way to make this system running very efficiently, in a very interesting way. Can produce hydrogen just by the water that is present on Mars. People were assuming there was no water. There is water, and if you have water, you can from water extract your hydrogen, interact with the CO2 from the atmosphere using all the expertise, the thousands of manuscripts on the CO2 capture that we have been written here on Earth, but will be much more effective if in Mars. It's a little bit naive, but it will work. Now, we have to approach the conclusion of this long talk. Let me tell that I will start in telling that if you read number 1, membrane news published by the European Membrane Society in 82, you will, or in 84, I don't remember the number, no, not 82, you will find one Chinese professor mentioning the importance, the logic, the strategy that he was designing on membrane science for the humanity. That was written already in 82. Now, if you go to China today, I was mentioning we have a lot of opportunity. We have a lot of things that can be done. But be careful. Be careful because we know a lot of what is going on today because we have strong organization. We have world system where we can discuss everything. China, by the way, is part of the World Association of Membrane Societies. So the Chinese are working with us. However, they are doing much, much, much more than what we are doing. If you go today to China, if you go in the Jiangsu province, Jiangsu is the richest province of China, which means the richest industrial activities in the world. Now, they already created the Jiangsu Membrane Industrial Park. There's no other place in the world where we have a membrane industrial park. Initially, you see this stage is 60,000 square meters of installation, research organization, university, industrial application, pilot scale platform, international research center, technology transfer, etc. During the pandemic, during the last 3 years, these 60,000 square meters are going to be 2,400. They multiply 3, 250,000 square meters on construction. Huge, incredible. We will never have something similar. That is only based on the efforts at political level, by the way. Jiangsu is a province, but it's a very rich province, and what they do has been sponsored. And near this is not just the professor making some application. It's much more than this. Near this industrial membrane park, they have already a membrane valley. That means all the company created in this industrial membrane park, 60,000 already, and some of you have been visiting the place, but already now, today, I don't know, I will see in the next month how big is now, but the project was 250,000, 3 times much bigger. They have already the membrane valley, where there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 company moving out from the industrial membrane park and going to work in the membrane valley. Forget about these IT, biotechnology, etc. Everything is already here. And they have here company producing ceramic membranes, very competitive, making industrial level per evaporation, making nanofiltration membrane in collaboration with European companies, etc., etc. Very, very interesting, and we have to try to be aware of what is going on and to collaborate as much as possible with them, and to avoid that we will be cancelled if we don't do it this way. By the way, I was mentioning about what is happening in Nanjing, but it's not just Nanjing. If you go now in Weihai, in the Shandong province, it's not at the level of Nanjing, but now they are creating a Sino-European Membrane Science and Technology Center. ITM, we have been collaborating a lot, and some of you have been also visiting Weihai, very nice city on the sea, just on the coastal of Shannon Yellow Sea, and you can see in Weihai that now they are creating this kind of industrial park, as in Nanjing. European scientists are already involved a lot. Most of you have been attending already conference in Weihai, and this system is becoming also, this is just the starting of this industrial Weihai municipal government established industrial membrane park in Weihai. You can see here your past president and the running president of the ITM, Lietta Giorno and Alberto and myself, in which that was already in 2019, but already now this is becoming more and more an effective, competitive industrial membrane park as in Nanjing. Keep in mind that we already predict that this is something that we have to consider. The ITM is publishing, as I assume all of you is receiving, EU-China membrane newsletter, and my suggestion, read it. Years ago, we had a problem in having good, important news from China. Today, we have much more problem to have good news from Europe than from China. If you read the last issue of this EU-China membrane newsletter, you'll find a lot of activities going on in China. A little bit less positive activities, interesting new development, interesting new research, and transfer to real life. A little bit less what we have in the European countries for different reasons in the last few years. And the situation is that we have to take care of this, because what the European Membrane Society has been doing from the very early stage is to promote and promote, very successful. But now we have to do more than what has been done. In the last few years, what we made in the past 30, 40 years has been very significant. Membranes are dominant in different areas, but still energy, space, health, but we are not talking about the medical applications, etc., are some of the new frontiers that we have in front, where the contribution can be very, very significant and important. So, and in peace, we have to try to collaborate with the people who understood this, as we made already in 82. But and today, the Chinese are the one showing the real significant interest in what is going on in membrane science. And it's important that they also realize that Europe can be an important, interesting partner. We are, in all these activities, we are quite very present, and we can collaborate and promote new successful part of the membrane history for the next few decades. You, particularly, we made already our part, I have to say. Thank you for your attention, and sorry for so long. And if you have any question, I can try to answer, or I will send you answer as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Enrico Drioli, for very good talk. And the most important thing that this video is recorded and will be available online at YouTube,
Oh my
at
God.
EMS channel. So it means that at any time, so you may still join that and to see that the history, which is very important to remember how it started. And I would say that there was quite a long way, and we are very lucky having Enrico Drioli in the beginning with your motivation and energy to union different people from different regions, and it's very important to get worldwide membrane activity. And now that's open for the questions. And do we have any question from the audience?
Sorry, they are telling me that I forgot there was some other slide, but don't worry. Go ahead, Alexia. Sorry.
Yeah. So people, thank you for the good success story of EMS from that's from Usman Said. I would like to ask from myself, Enrico, do you think that taking into account the what's going on in the different regions, and that's for China, for Europe, do we need to focusing more on the fundamental research, or we need to go more for the industrial applications, or for the practical aspects like modeling of membrane modules or the processes? What do you think?
Well, as I will show you, we do have to do everything basically. I don't see I don't see there's big difference between fundamental and real research, by the way, and applied research. My suggestion is different. We have to stop making just membrane that nobody will never use. That's what we have to do. We need to pay much more attention to processing with membranes. That means we have to use membranes. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is a people, not in the publication, there is a lot of help. No, today I was mentioning reverse osmosis is a dominant technology in desalination. But the membrane that we are using desalination today, making plants producing 1 million cubic meter of fresh water per single day, are the same that were studied and invented in 85, 30, 40 years ago. Nothing different, basically. The real progress has been done in this case, in desalination, in the system. Membranes per se don't exist, have no interest except for making publication. What is running are systems based on the use of membranes. There is a nice report that I sent to a lot of you from the American Chemical Society, showing that, again, going to China again, the China that was the important number one of chemical technologies from all around the world in the last decades, today is the number one exporter of chemical technology worldwide. If you check carefully how does it happen, you will see that all the system in which the Chinese are now exporting technology and not importing anymore are based in the system membrane technologies present. That means what we have to do is to use membranes, not just making publication with membranes a little bit different from the other that you know already that nobody will never use. Which means that the fundamental, also term fundamental, what do you mean? There is a lot already of fundamental done. However, every day we need new understanding. That means new fundamentals. But the new fundamentals are really important when to the fundamentals some real effect, some real action will take place. If the fundamental will stay forever as fundamentals, is less interesting, particularly today. We have a lot of work done. We have to use this work. In the meantime, when you do good work, good application, you will soon realize that something new can be done. And something new has to be understood. You have to understand something new. And that is fundamentals. But otherwise, if you start now to redefine, instead of the solubility of the modeling that we are using now, you are starting going back, you reinvent the pore system. seems to be fundamental, but Glukov made already 50 years ago. And there are people now making one more publication telling again that this, I don't think is very interesting, useful, necessary. Much more useful to understand how can we live on Mars and to realize that membranes can help you to do it using the membrane that we have been realizing on Earth and never took any action on Earth for CO2 recovery and reuse. A lot will be done when you will be in the satellite where the atmosphere is CO2 and we have to use the CO2. And
Indeed.
so, but basically, paid more attention to processing with membranes and less attention just to make new membranes. We don't need new membranes at the moment, except some case. Another point, we need to understand much more on transport phenomena in hydrophobic membrane, not hydrophilic. Today, all the new processes are on hydrophobic. Our body is full of hydrophobic membrane, not hydrophilic. And if you go in literature, there is still a lot of hydrophilic, and only 10% hydrophobic. We need 90% hydrophobic understanding and 10% hydrophilic now. That's my vision, and all the tradition.
And I would like to add to your comment, and I would suggest for young people who join membrane research to go back to the old issues of Journal of Membrane Science in 70s, 80s. And I would say that is a very good example of the papers, how it's written, and there are a lot of information actually. Less speculations and more discussions based on the real data. And that's quite a good example, as I said, yeah.
I agree with you 100%. If you go back to some of the publication of Journal of Membrane Science in the late 70s, etc., you will find Sidloeb papers describing what is pressure retarded osmosis at that time with the big potentiality and limits. But it was written already by Sid, and not many people today can know about. They don't read. This kind is very difficult to find on the internet, this kind of publication report. But you are totally right. There is much more attention to real problems initially than today. Today, there's much more just changing one material with another. But the question is why I have to change? And which are the real benefits? What will really happen? And that is normally not sufficiently present in a lot of projects we have in progress today, which does not mean that we need fundamentals. We need a lot of fundamentals. But let's start from the fundamental already existing, from the understanding already existing. Let's try to make this fundamental useful for more progress. And the progress done until now are only a small part of what can be done. This plot I show you, this exponential growth in research interest in some kind of application is typical because young generation are smart. They know what is, they understand, as we understood at that moment, what is going to be important, much faster than the experts sometimes, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Enrico, so we have a question from Sarah, and she's asking that what potential do you see for peroporation or for crystallization?
Pervaporation, pervaporation has been interesting system years ago already, with no big success at the industrial level in the past. If you go to China today, one of the 5 companies I was showing in the Membrane Valley in the Jiangsu province is a pervaporation industry. They already installed 400 plants all around China. They don't export too much, but it's been already installed in China. There's a lot of a process, the one I was mentioned before. If you read this report of the American Chemical Society, one of the cases that they analyze is pervaporation. The Chinese have been using pervaporation in real life. They install it in some real system, and they mine know they have 400 plant running, not designed, running already in evaporation. We don't have all around Europe and the United States. We will have 50 plant, 60. They have 400 only in China. So evaporation, now this is a case where we can also study better membranes eventually, more resistant membranes, etc., including inorganic membranes. Ceramic membranes in evaporation are only Chinese at the moment, or zeolite membranes in evaporation. So evaporation is one of the area. Membrane crystallizer is one of the new system that I predict will have the same growth in 1 decade from here that I was showing before in membrane distillation. You will have in membrane crystallizer the same exponential growth. Membrane crystallization is nothing more than membrane distillation, by the way, but is contributing to solve a problem. However, there will be a lot of fundamental aspect in this case has to be understood. We are publishing papers now where we are introducing plasmonic phenomena unknown to me until 1 year ago, and to most part of the membrane people. Plasmonic phenomena means the control of temperature, polarization phenomena, etc. is very important. This is fundamental. But you have to talk with your friends in the Department of Physics if you want to learn something, because we have no idea about plasmonic phenomena. More than this, we are assuming that normally in porous membranes, the chemistry of the system is not very important. It's a physical process, and so there's no real problem with chemistry. Not at all. If you go to crystallization, you will realize that I am not able to crystallize some salts. I'm able to crystallize magnesium, potassium, sodium, etc. I'm not able to crystallize at all rubidium or cesium using some fluoropolymers. PVDF that everybody has been using, you lose your time. Stop trying to crystallize with PVDF membranes. Why this? Fundamental problem. Now, a very strong electronegative activity of the fluorine is creating wetting with some ions, not with all. But if you through the experiment, do it with lithium or rubidium, and eventually some other rare earths where everybody is spending money now, you will never make any crystal. And don't try to solve the problem. It's fundamental that will not be solved except you invent something new. Because of the wetting, the interaction between the various electronegative activity of the fluorine, stop everything. Try to do the same with polypropylene. Polypropylene you can crystallize very easily. No fluorine, and you can do it. So these aspects, you don't find one paper in literature describing this until now. And these phenomena are the one that you can make a lot of interesting publication. We made hundreds of publications in this, but we never arrived to the crystallization of rubidium or lithium. There was no interest few years ago. Now that you can try to do it, you realize that if you want to crystallize, all your PVDF membrane, put in the garbage, don't work. Or Iflon, similar. And go back to polypropylene, it works nicely. Why? And now that is very fundamental. And to predict which kind of polymer you have to use, that will be very nice.
So that's something that's related to what people are doing with artificial intelligence to predict exactly. The optimized polymer for different applications.
Exactly. That is something in this case. If the IT can help in this, that would be very nice.
Okay. If we don't have any further questions, I'd like to thank you, Enrico, for the very interesting talk, and that's very interesting actually for people, for not today but in the future. So it's that part of the European Membrane Society history is now online. And as we know that what is online there, yeah, it will live forever. So thank you very much for the very good and very informative overview of the history. And with that, I'd like to ask Carla to make a short update of European Member Society news on the awards.
Thanks, Alexei. So, of course, I congratulate Enrico for such a nice presentation. I think lessons can be learned from the past, from the present, and that can really help creating a better future. So, yeah. Now, before ending this kind of already a long session, I would like to talk we would like to talk specifically to students and to young academics. Please apply to conference awards. Please follow Professor Drioli example. He left the lab. Also, he went to communicate with other people, to collaborate with other people, and conferences are a great way for young students, young academics to know different persons with complementary knowledge or not. So please give us work. We want to evaluate the conference awards, and there are now a lot that will come. The Sorrento membrane distillation. I don't want to lose every conference, but next year there will be the Euromembrane. And so on. So please be aware. ICOM this year, we'll start the selection shortly. Please apply to these awards. That would be really important for you and for us because we make us proud. Okay.
Yeah. So it's once again that the major activity of European Member Society is to provide the mobility for the young generation by giving them the awards, and European Member Society covering the conference fee for the different conferences. So that's giving the opportunity of the young generation to go to the different countries. But also that's a very good point for your CV because that's also award, and that's award given based on the evaluation. And regarding ICOM 2023, so for the European Member Society Award, so the deadline is April 10, but we are in contact with the organizers of ICOM 2023 about the announcement of the acceptance of the abstracts. So we will be required to change the deadline. So we will post that on the website, and also we will inform our members through email. So keep eye on the website, and I hope seeing all of you in Japan in July.
Okay, so I think we can now end the session. Thanks for your present, and keep in touch. Go to the website of EMS regularly to see other webinars and apply for the conference awards. Yeah.
Yeah, and next EMS webinar will be the first Wednesday in May, and see you there. And Enrico, thank you very much for your time and sharing that history. And have a great day for all of you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Good luck.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.